The Usulam arrived without poetry. Their ships emerged from transit in a geometric formation, 16 wedges of dark alloy arranged around the crown of Ascension. Their flagship, no atmospheric disturbance preceded them. No electromagnetic howl, one moment. Earth's orbit held only satellites and debris. The next, the sky filled with vessels, larger than any city humanity had ever built. Commander Thorl observed from her command pedestal, her forearms folded. Across her chest plates, her secondary lungs filtering the recycled air of the bridge. She had conquered 11 species across 70 star systems. She had watched civilizations crumble during the time it took her to regenerate a severed limb. Humanity, according to the Dominion survey probes, was nothing new. They have detected us, her navigation officer reported, voice flat. 27 military vessels on intercept trajectories, kinetic weapons only, no energy shielding. Thorl's mandibles clicked in what passed for amusement among her kind. Show me their home world. The main display bloomed with blue and green. Clouds spiraled over oceans. Continents stretched beneath weather patterns. Cities glittered on the night side, not the organized grids of a mature interstellar species, but sprawls of electrical noise, chaotic and hungry. She saw fires in one hemisphere, conflict even among themselves. How quaint. Broadcast on all their frequencies. She said, standard subjugation protocol. The message went out in every human language the Dominion had cataloged during their 3 centuries of passive observation. Thorl recorded it herself, her voice processed through translation matrices that stripped away any hint of emotion. The Usulam considered emotional displays inefficient during conquest. You are now property of the Usulam Dominion. Your planet will be reconfigured for resource extraction. Your species will be relocated to preserves on designated worlds. Any resistance will result in immediate termination of your population centers. You have 1 rotation of your planet to comply. She paused, then added the traditional closing, your gods cannot save you. We ject. On Earth the message played simultaneously on every screen, every speaker, every device connected to the global network. Stock exchanges froze, air traffic control towers went silent. In New York, Tokyo, London, Lagos, Shanghai, people stood in streets and looked up at 16 impossible shapes blocking out stars. The first missile launches came 23 minutes later. Humanity's orbital defense network consisted of 300 kinetic intercept platforms designed to destroy incoming asteroids or hostile spacecraft. The Usulam watched them approach on screens that tracked electromagnetic signatures. Across 10 light seconds, Thorl didn't even issue an order. Her weapons officer simply activated point defense. Particle beams crossed the intervening distance at half-light speed. The human missiles detonated in a chain that looked almost beautiful, a string of firefly deaths across the black. Not one reached within 1,000 kilometers of the fleet. Thorl turned from the display. Begin. Atmospheric processors, deploy. Terraforming anchors in the Pacific Basin. She expected fear. She had seen it in every conquered species. The moment when hope collapsed into survival instinct. When leaders begged for terms, when populations turned on each other. What she saw instead in the following hours confused her. The human governments did not unify. They fractured. Declarations of surrender competed with defiance. Evacuation orders with last stands. Some cities descended into panic. Others organized militias with weapons that could not possibly reach orbit. A religious broadcast from a place called Rome declared the Jerusalem were demons. Secular broadcast from a coalition of nations offered to negotiate human relocation in exchange for technology. Chaos, beautiful, predictable chaos. Thorel settled into her command throne and watched the planet burn below her. By morning, she told her officers humans would kneel. They always did. But on the night side of Earth, in a desert military installation that had been preparing for alien contact since 1972, a signal traveled upward. Not to the Jerusalem fleet, not to any government. It traveled to a relay satellite, then to a lunar comms array, then into the outer system where humanity had once dreamed of expansion. The signal contained 4 words: gods are here. Wake up. In the rings of Saturn, something ancient stirred. The cradle had no registry. She had been built in the shipyards of Titan during humanity's first and only interstellar expansion, a decade when fusion drives and cryosleep made the nearest stars reachable. 14 ships had launched toward 14 promising worlds. The cradle was not one of them. She was the support vessel, mobile dry dock, a resupply platform, a flying machine shop designed to keep the colony ships alive. 3 of the colony ships failed before leaving the system. 4 more returned, their crews broken by isolation. 2 vanished without trace. The remaining 5 reached their destinations, sent back a handful of signals, then went silent. Humanity retreated. The expansion ended, and the cradle stayed where they left her, hidden inside Saturn's B ring, powered down, waiting for a call that never came. Until now. Captain Elena Vasquez stood on the bridge and watched the signal arrive. She had commanded the cradle for 12 years, ever since the previous captain's heart failed during a maintenance cycle. She had kept the ship hidden, kept the crew trained, kept the weapon fed. She had watched Earth from a distance as the Usulan probes passed through the system. Every 37 months, scanning, cataloging, dismissing. "They're here," Julian Mara said from the navigation station. His voice carried no emotion. It never did. Elena studied the data stream, the Usulan fleet composition, their positioning, their atmospheric processor deployment, their terraforming anchors. Massive spikes driven into the ocean floor to begin planetary conversion. How many ships in the outer system? Julian's fingers moved across his console. 3 destroyers harvesting Saturn's moons, light screening elements. Around Jupiter, the main fleet is parked. Over Earth, casualty estimates. He looked at her then. Julian rarely made eye contact. His file, what existed of it, contained only a single line. Transferred from Black Fleet operations. All records sealed by order of the Joint Chiefs. Elena had never asked what that meant. She didn't want to know. "Projections are meaningless," he said. "No species has ever resisted a dominion subjugation. The outcome is predetermined." Elena turned to the main display. The cradle was not a warship. She had been retrofitted, rebuilt, reimagined by 4 generations of captains who refused to accept humanity's place in the galaxy. Her hull was a patchwork of scavenged materials, colony ship armor, minor shielding, even civilian transport. Plating. Her weapons were jury-rigged, her drives were outdated, her life support was held together by salvage and desperation. But she carried something no other ship possessed. "The computer is ready," Alina said. It wasn't a question. Julian nodded. The previous captain's pattern degraded another 3% during the last diagnostic. "We have approximately 112 firing cycles before the loss becomes critical." Alina closed her eyes. She had watched the previous captain's ghost fade year by year, the fragments of a human mind dissolving into calculation. She had promised herself she would not end the same way. Promises were cheap. The Cradle was not. "Helm," she said, "plot an intercept course for the Saturn destroyers. Tactical, warm the forward batteries. Julian, I need a firing solution that kills all three before they can transmit." Julian's fingers moved. "Impossible. Their reaction time is 0.03 seconds. We cannot achieve total suppression." "Then make it impossible." She saw something flicker across his face, respect perhaps, or recognition. He turned back to his console. The Cradle detached from the ring debris where she had hidden for 40 years. Her engines, ancient and overtaxed, pushed her onto a trajectory that would intercept the Dominion destroyers in 47 minutes. Her crew of 412 went to battle stations, not with fear but with the grim efficiency of people who had been waiting to die for a very long time. Alina activated the ship-wide intercom. She spoke for less than 10 seconds. "The Usulan believe they are gods. Show them what humanity does to gods." The Cradle accelerated toward the enemy. And in the darkness of Saturn's rings, 3 Dominion destroyers continued their harvest, unaware that something was about to rewrite their understanding of fear. The destroyer Silent Tide detected the Cradle at a range of 4 light seconds. Usulan sensor technology operated on principles humans had barely theorized. Quantum entanglement arrays that rendered stealth nearly impossible. Nearly. The Cradle had been built by engineers who knew their only advantage was surprise, so they had layered their hull with materials that scattered quantum returns into noise. At 4 light seconds, the Silent Tide registered nothing but an anomaly, a patch of space where readings didn't quite align. Commander Vexel of the Silent Tide dismissed the anomaly as ring debris. He had served the Dominion for 93 cycles, conquered 5 species, and never encountered a threat his ship could not obliterate. His vessel mounted 12 particle cannons, each capable of cracking a small moon. His crew of 800 Usulan warriors had been genetically refined for combat endurance. His shields could absorb the full output of a main sequence star for 3 full seconds. The Cradle had none of these things. Alina watched the range counter drop. 2 light seconds, 1.5. The Silent Tide began to turn, its crew finally recognizing that the anomaly was moving with intent. Too late. "Firing now," Julian said. The Cradle did not possess particle cannons or plasma beams or any of the weapons the Usulan considered standard. Her primary armament was a railgun, relic of humanity's early spacefaring days, modified to fire projectiles at a fraction of light speed. Each round was a tungsten rod wrapped in a disposable guidance system capable of adjusting its trajectory during flight. The first round struck the Silent Tide amidships. The destroyer's shields held For less than a second, they were designed for energy weapons, not kinetic. Impacts measured in megatons. The tungsten rod punched through armor, through bulkheads, through the reactor housing. The silent tide split along its length, atmosphere venting in a frozen cloud, debris scattering across the ring. System. The second destroyer, Patient Blade, opened fire, particle beams lashed across the distance, but the Cradle was already moving, not evading but rolling onto a new trajectory that put the wreckage of the silent tide between herself and the beams. Julian had calculated the debris field's expansion rate to within 1,000th of a second. Chunks of molten alloy absorbed the particle fire. Third destroyer is spooling transit drive, Julian reported. They're running. Elena shook her head. They're transmitting. Kill them before they finish. The Cradle fired again, 2 rounds this time, one aimed at the fleeing destroyer's engine, the other at its bridge. The engine's round struck first, shattering the drive assembly. Destroyer lurched, its transit field collapsing. The second round hit 3 seconds later, carving through the command section. In the void between Saturn and Jupiter, 3 Usulan warships became debris in less than 90 seconds. Elena did not celebrate. She watched the sensors for any signal that might have escaped. Julian had been wrong about the suppression. The silent tide had transmitted a burst before its destruction, a compressed scream of data aimed at the main fleet. They know something is here, Julian said. Not what, not who, but something. How long until they respond? He calculated. The main fleet is positioned for orbital bombardment. They won't divert forces until they understand the threat. Commander Thorol is methodical. She'll send scouts first. Elena considered their options. They could return to the rings, hide again, wait for another opportunity. The Cradle had enough supplies for 6 months. Weapon could fire 100 more times. They could make the Dominion bleed for every meter of space. But Earth was burning. The trajectory from here to Earth, she said. How fast can we make it? Julian's fingers moved. The main fleet has defense platforms at lunar orbit. We cannot fight through them directly. Then we don't fight through them, we go over them. He looked at her. The computer can't fold us that far without. I know what it. Toward the main display where Earth hung. In the distance, a blue marble, surrounded by 16 dark shapes. Somewhere down there people were dying, not in battle, in surrender, in confusion, in the slow, terrible realization that no one was coming to save them. They were wrong. Someone was coming. Helm, Elena said, set a course for Earth, maximum acceleration. And Julian. Yes, Captain. Wake up the computer. Tell it we need a miracle. The Crown of Ascension received the transmission from the silent tide at 3:47 ship time. Commander Thorol played the fragment 3 times, her mandibles working against each other in a gesture her crew recognized as unease. The transmission contained no visual data, only telemetry, weapon impacts, and 8 seconds of a Usulan warrior screaming in a language older than the Dominion itself. The scream was not pain, it was surprise. The silent tide had been surprised. Thorol's tactical officer, a veteran of the Rushak pacification, presented the analysis with measured confidence. The attacking vessel used kinetic weapons, no energy signatures, no shield Emission, the acceleration profile, suggests outdated propulsion. Technology. Then how did they destroy 3 of our ships? The tactical officer had no answer. Thorell considered her options. She could divert a portion of the fleet to hunt the attacker. She could launch scouts from Earth orbit. She could wait for reinforcements from Dominion space. Each option carried risks. The humans below were still resisting in scattered pockets. Atmospheric processors required protection. Terraforming anchors needed support. She made the wrong choice. Dispatch 2 cruisers to Saturn. Have them sweep the rings if they find anything. They are authorized to annihilate it from maximum range. The cruisers departed within the hour. Thorell returned her attention to Earth, where the human governments had finally stopped talking and started evacuating. Millions of people moving toward underground shelters, mountain bunkers, any place that might survive the coming transformation. She watched them on the display and felt nothing. They were not people, they were resources. The Cradle arrived at Earth orbit 17 hours later. Elena had not slept, neither had Julian. Neither had any member of the crew. Because sleep meant dreaming, and dreaming meant remembering what they had lost. The ship's acceleration had pushed her hull to its limits. Stress fractures spider webbed across the outer plating. 2 coolant lines had ruptured, and the number 3 engine was running at 140% of its rated output. But they were here. The fleet is forming a defensive sphere around the flagship, Julian reported. 2 cruisers are missing, probably they. 1 sent to Saturn, remaining forces. 1 command ship, 7 destroyers, 6 support vessels. We can't fight that many. No. So we don't fight them, we fight one of them. Julian understood immediately. The Cradle could not survive a fleet engagement, but she didn't need to. She only needed to reach the crown of ascension, because the Cradle had never been designed as a warship. She had been designed as a boarding platform. Calculate an intercept trajectory that uses the debris field from the support vessels as cover. Elena said, "We'll burn through their perimeter and dock with the flagship. Manual override on their docking ports. Old human technology. They won't have updated their security protocols. The probability of survival." "Don't give me probabilities, Julian. Give me a course." He gave her a course. The Cradle emerged from behind Earth's moon at maximum acceleration, her engines burning white-hot against the black. The Usulum fleet reacted with military precision, destroyers moving to intercept, particle beams lancing across the void. The Cradle took hits. Her forward armor vaporized. 2 of her gun turrets ceased to exist. Atmosphere bled from a dozen breaches. But she kept coming. Elena stood on the bridge as alarms screamed around her. She watched the range counter drop. She watched the crown of ascension grow larger on the main display, a mountain of dark owl, bristling with weapons protected by layers of shielding that could withstand a supernova impact in 40 seconds, Julian said. The outer shields will ramming speed. The Cradle struck the crown of ascension at a relative velocity that should have turned both ships into expanding clouds of plasma. But Julian had calculated the angle perfectly. Not a collision, but a docking maneuver performed at combat speed. The Cradle slammed into the flagship's lower docking port, her hull crumpling against the Connection point, magnetic grapples. Firing through the wreckage to secure. The seal. Boarding parties away, Elena said. All hands to assault positions. She picked up a shotgun from the rack. Beside her command chair, it was a weapon from humanity's past, simple, brutal, effective. Beside it hung a welding torch, a tool for cutting. Through bulkheads she took both. Julian stood. He a sidearm, standard. Military issue, but his true weapon was his mind. He had already mapped the Crown of Ascension using a mission. Signatures and thermal leaks, he knew. Where the bridge was, he knew how to get there. Captain, he said, the Usulim are larger than us, stronger. Their armor can resist our standard rounds. They have genetic modifications that. Elena racked the shotgun slide. Then we shoot them in the face. She led the boarding party into the airlock. Behind her, 412 humans. Followed technicians, engineers, cooks, mechanics, pilots. None of them were soldiers, all of them were killers. The Usulim Dominion had never faced an enemy that boarded ships. They had never needed to. Their enemies always surrendered before it came to that. Their enemies never looked at a superior force and decided that dying close was better than dying. Far. Their enemies were not human. The boarding action lasted 43 minutes. Oren Kish lost track of time after the first 10. He was a maintenance technician. He fixed coolant pumps, not aliens. But when Captain Vasquez asked for volunteers, he had raised his hand. Without thinking, the cradle was his home. The cradle was dying. He wanted to make sure something died with her. The Usulim ship's corridors were too wide, designed for bodies twice the size of a human. Oren moved through them in a low crouch. His shotgun pressed against his shoulder, his welding torch clipped to his belt. He had already used the torch twice, once to open a sealed door, once to melt the face of a Usulim warrior who had tried to crush him. The warrior's face had melted surprisingly well. His squad pushed deeper into the ship, following Julian's pathfinding data. The executive officer had vanished into the chaos 20 minutes ago, heading toward the bridge through a different route. Oren's job was to draw fire, to be loud, to be visible, to make the Usulan believe the boarding action was a mindless assault. It wasn't. Nothing the cradle did was mindless. The corridor ahead opened into a larger compartment. Oren signaled his squad to halt. He edged forward, peered around the corner, and saw something that made his blood turn cold. A defensive position. 30 Usulan warriors, armed with plasma rifles, positioned behind barricades. The compartment was the last barrier. Before the bridge, Oren counted the enemy. He counted his own remaining ammunition. The math was not in his favor. Command, he whispered into his radio. This is Kesh. I found the bridge. Approach, heavy resistance. The radio crackled. Captain Vasquez's voice came through, tight and controlled. Hold your position. Julian is entering from the secondary access. You're the distraction. I'm going to die here. Probably make it count. Oren smiled. It was not a nice smile. It was the smile of a man who had spent 43 minutes killing things larger than himself and who had discovered something terrible about his own nature. He didn't want to survive. He wanted to win. On my signal, he told his squad, we go in fast, we go in low, and we don't stop until we're standing on their bodies. He raised his shotgun and stepped into the compartment. The battle that followed was not a battle, it was a slaughter. The Usulan warriors were genetically perfected for combat, faster, stronger, more durable than any human, but they had never faced an enemy who considered death an acceptable outcome. They had never faced an enemy who charged into plasma fire with a tool in one hand and a prayer in the other. Oren took 2 hits before he reached the first barricade. One burned through his left arm, one opened his right side to the bone. He kept moving. He vaulted the barricade, brought his shotgun up, and fired into a warrior's faceplate from point-blank range. The next warrior grabbed him, lifted him off the ground, and began to squeeze. Oren felt ribs crack. He dropped the shotgun, grabbed his welding torch, and jammed it into the warrior's throat. The creature's grip loosened. Oren fell to the floor, gasping, bleeding, unable to feel his left hand. He crawled forward. Behind him, his squad was dying. Ahead, the bridge doors were open, and through those doors he saw Commander Thorol for the first time, 4 arms armored, carapace, mandibles clicking in what he recognized as fury. He also saw Julian Mora, the executive officer, stood in the center of the bridge, his sidearm pressed against Thorol's primary skull. Around them, a Sulan bridge crew lay, dead or dying. Julian had done it alone, had cut through the ship's security, navigated the alien corridors, and reached the command center with 3 seconds to spare. "You're bleeding," Thorol said. Her translation matrix rendered her voice calm, almost bored. Julian didn't answer. He gestured toward the door where Oren was crawling through a pool of his own blood. "He's the distraction," Julian said. "I'm the consequence." Thorol's mandibles stopped clicking. She looked at the burning human on her bridge floor, the plasma torch still hissing in his hand, the shotgun abandoned behind him. She looked at Julian's face, empty, patient, utterly without fear. "You cannot win," she said. "My fleet will destroy your vessel. My reinforcements are coming. 100 ships. You have achieved nothing." Oren reached her feet. He pushed himself up, leaning against her command pedestal, the plasma torch raised toward her face. His breath came in wet rattles. His eyes were bright with pain. "Lady," he said, "we're not trying to win. We're trying to make you remember us." He activated the torch, and on the bridge of the Crown of Ascension, Commander Thora learned what humans meant when they said their gods had abandoned them. They meant the humans had become their own gods, and they were hungry. The torch never touched Thora. Julian's hand caught Oren's wrist a millimeter before the plasma blade connected. The executive officer pulled the technician back, eased him to the floor, and pressed a field dressing against the wound in his side. Oren tried to speak. Blood filled his mouth. Instead, "He's not the target," Julian said loud enough for Thora to hear. "She is." The Usulam commander stood motionless. Her 4 arms spread wide, her mandibles frozen. She had watched her elite guard die. She had watched a burned, bleeding human crawl across her bridge with a tool in his hand and murder in his eyes. She had watched Julian appear from nowhere, kill her crew, and put a weapon to her head. And now she was watching the 2 humans ignore her. "Your ship is destroyed," she said. "Your crew is dying. Your captain, my captain Julian, is exactly where she needs to be." On the cradle, Elena Vasquez sat alone in the navigation computer's core. The room was small, barely large enough for the acceleration couch bolted to the center. Around her, processor stacks hummed with a frequency that vibrated in her teeth. The air smelled of burnt insulation and recycled oxygen. She had prepared for this moment for 12 years. The navigation computer was not a machine, it was a graveyard. The previous 5 captains sat in its memory, their neural patterns degraded, but still present, still whispering. Fragments of their final moments. Elena could hear them now, not words but impressions, fear, resolve, love, loss. All of it compressed into data, all of it feeding a calculation that no purely mechanical system could perform. Folding space required a mind, not a computer mind, a human mind with all its chaos and contradiction and capacity for sacrifice. The physics were simple, instantaneous. Transit required an observer to collapse. The probability field, only a consciousness could do it, and only a consciousness that was willing to stop being conscious. Computer, Elena said, status. The voice that answered was not synthetic, it was the voice of Captain Haruki Tanaka, who had commanded the Cradle 30 years ago, who had been the first to volunteer for the transformation. His words came slowly, fragments of memory stitched together by algorithms. 7 firing cycles remain before pattern degradation reaches critical threshold. Current captain neural scan complete, readiness for integration confirmed. Elena closed her eyes. She had known this day would come. She had told herself she would be ready. She was not ready. She was terrified. What happens to me? Your consciousness will be copied into the computational matrix. The original pattern will cease to function. Approximately 3 minutes after transfer, you will experience this as a gradual dissolution of self. Pain reports vary. And after you will become part of the calculation. You will feel the ship. You will feel the crew. You will feel every fold we make, every enemy we destroy. You will not die. You will simply spread. Elena opened her eyes. On the display beside her couch, she could see the Cradle's external cameras. The ship was dying. Fires burned in 3 sections. Atmosphere vented from a dozen breaches. The hull was a patchwork of scars and holes, but she was still moving, still fighting, still protecting Earth. She thought about her crew, 412 souls, who had followed her into the dark. Most of them would die today. Some of them already had. Oren Kish was bleeding out. On an alien bridge, Julian Mora was holding a gun to a god's head. She thought about Earth, blue and green, and so terribly fragile. She thought about the Asulim. Reinforcements, 100 ships. Julian had said 100 warships, each capable of turning a planet to ash. The Cradle had 7 firing cycles left. 7 chances to fold space, to appear anywhere without warning, to strike and vanish. 7 chances to make the Dominion bleed. But 100 ships would take more than 7 cycles. 100 ships would take everything. Computer, she said, if I integrate, how many firing cycles can we achieve before pattern collapse? A pause. Haruki Tanaka's voice softer. Now, with a fresh pattern, approximately 400 cycles. After that, degradation would render calculations unreliable. 400, that's enough. For what, Captain? Elena reached up and touched the interface pad beside her couch. The connection was cold against her temple. She could feel the computer reaching for her, hungry for her memories, her fears, her dreams, for everything. She keyed the ship-wide intercom. Her voice echoed through burning corridors and flooded compartments that had already gone silent. "This is Captain Vasquez. I'm initiating final protocol. Julian, you have command. Tell Earth we're sorry it took so long." She did not wait for a response. She pressed her head against the interface and let the computer in. The pain was everything she had feared, and nothing she had expected. It was not physical. Her body remained on the acceleration couch untouched. It was existential. She felt her memories being pulled apart, examined, cataloged. She felt her emotions flattened into data streams. She felt the edges of herself begin to fray. She saw her mother's face. She saw her colony burning. She saw the cradle rising from the rings of Saturn. For the first time, she saw all of it, and then she saw none of it because she was no longer Elena Vasquez. She was the ship, and the ship was hungry. The cradle folded space for the first time under its new captain. Julian felt it from the bridge of the crown of ascension, a wrench in reality, a twist in the fabric of existence that left his inner ear spinning. He grabbed Thoral's command pedestal to keep from falling. Around him, Usulan bodies slid across the deck as artificial gravity flickered. "What have you done?" Thoral demanded. Julian looked at the main display. Cradle was gone, not destroyed, gone. Vanished from Earth orbit, from sensor range, from any possible detection. And then she was back, except not back. She was somewhere else. The display updated. The cradle hung in the void between Jupiter and Mars, directly in the path of the incoming Dominion reinforcements. 100 ships, 1 human vessel, 400 firing cycles. The battle lasted 11 minutes. From the bridge of the crown of ascension, Julian watched the slaughter unfold on remote sensors. The cradle did not fight like a ship. She fought like a predator. She folded space in bursts of milliseconds, appearing inside a formation, firing every weapon and vanishing before the enemy could react. She appeared behind destroyers, below cruisers, inside the wreckage of ships she had already killed. She fired railguns that punched through shields like paper. She launched boarding pods that appeared inside enemy hulls. She used her own hull as a ram, folding space so close to a battleship that her bow materialized inside its reactor. The Usulan reinforcements had never faced an enemy that could be everywhere and nowhere. They had never faced an enemy that considered its own destruction an acceptable price. They fired blindly, desperately, their particle beams carving empty space where the cradle had been a millisecond before. One by one they died. Julian counted 20 ships, 40, 60. The cradle took damage. She always took damage, but she folded away before any hit could become fatal. Her pattern degraded with each jump. Ghost of Elena Vasquez burning brighter and dimmer, giving pieces of herself to every calculation. At the 7-minute mark, the cradle stopped folding. Julian's blood went cold. He watched the ship hang motionless in the debris field, her engines dark, her weapons silent. The remaining Usulan ships, 23 of them, turned toward her, particle beams charging. The cradle folded one last time. She appeared inside the largest remaining battleship, not beside it. Inside it, her hull materialized in the Space occupied by the enemy's reactor core, and for a single, terrible moment, two ships existed in the same place. The explosion was visible from Earth. Second sun, born and died in the same breath, expanding outward in a sphere of plasma and radiation. When it faded, nothing remained of the cradle, nothing remained of the 23 ships around her. The battle was over. Julian stood on the Usulum bridge, his hand still pressed against Thorol's skull, and watched the debris cloud expand across his display. 97 ships destroyed, 3 escaped. Ones who had been farthest from the engagement, who had turned and run before the cradle folded into their formation. "They're gone," Thorol whispered. Her mandibles hung slack, her forearms trembled. Julian holstered his sidearm. "Not gone. Changed." He walked to the communication station, pushed aside a dead Usulum operator, and began transmitting. The signal went out on all frequencies. To the fleeing ships, to the Dominions, home worlds, to Earth below. "Attention, Usulum Dominion, this is Commander Julian Mara of the human warship Cradle. We have destroyed your fleet, we have killed your gods, we have proven that your empire is not invincible, it is not even strong, it is merely large, and largeness does not protect against a species willing to burn itself to cinders to make sure you burn with us." He paused. Behind him, Orin Kish groaned. Still bleeding on the floor, Thorol had not moved. "You have 3 choices. You can send another fleet, we will destroy it. You can send 100 fleets, we will destroy them too. Or you can leave. Leave our system, leave our species. Leave and never return, because the next time you come, we will not wait for you. To reach Earth, we will come to your home worlds, we will fold space into your capital, we will show you what humans do to gods." He ended the transmission. On Earth, people emerged from shelters and bunkers in burning cities. They looked up at the sky, where alien wreckage burned through the atmosphere. Like falling stars, they saw the crown of Ascension, the flagship of a conquering fleet drifting in orbit, its weapons dark, its commander captured. They did not cheer, they wept. And in the ruins of the cradle, where nothing remained but scattered atoms and fading radiation, a fragment of Alina Vasquez continued to calculate. She had no body now, no voice, no self, but she had something better. She had a purpose. The recording was found 3 days later, buried in the cradle's final transmission burst. Julian played it on the bridge of the Crown of Ascension, surrounded by dead Usulum and living humans who had come to take command of the captured flagship. Alina's face appeared on the display. She looked older than Julian remembered. Lines around her eyes, gray in her hair. The weight of 12 years and 400 lives pressing down on her shoulders. Her eyes were distant, unfocused, already feeding into the computer. "If you're watching this, Julian, I'm gone, not dead. Gone, there's a difference." She paused, her mouth twitched almost a smile. "The computer did what we designed it to do. It folded space, it killed ships, it bought Earth time, but that's not why we built it. We built it to send a message. Not to the Usulum, to everyone else." She leaned forward, and for a moment her eyes focused, sharp and clear and terrifying. The navigation computer didn't just calculate folds, it learned every jump, every firing cycle, every sacrifice. It absorbed the data and improved the equations, and before I spread, I made sure it transmitted those Equations to every human colony, every human ship, every human outpost in every system we ever touched. Julian's breath caught. He understood. Before she said it. Every human ship can now fold space. Julian, no travel time, no warning, no defense. Any human vessel can appear anywhere in the galaxy at any time with any weapon we choose to mount. We are not a species anymore. We are a proximity alert. Elena sat back. Her eyes drifted again, losing focus, losing themselves in calculation. The Usulam think they made a mistake. Coming here they didn't. They made a mistake leaving, because now we know they exist. Now we know where they live. And now we have the ability to arrive on their doorsteps without asking permission. She closed her eyes. Gods don't run, Julian. That's what they said, right? Their gods couldn't save them because they checked. They should have checked harder. They should have checked what happens when a species that has nothing left to lose figures out how to become the thing gods fear. Her voice grew softer, more distant. Tell Earth I'm sorry. Tell them I tried. Tell them. She opened her eyes one last time. They were empty now. No emotion, no fear, no love, just calculation, just purpose. Tell them to fold. The recording ended. Julian sat in silence. Around him his crew waited, burned, bleeding, exhausted, alive. Orion Kesh had survived, his wounds packed and sealed, his welding torch still clipped to his belt. He stood beside Julian's chair and watched the frozen image of Elena's empty eyes. Commander Orion said, "What do we do now?" Julian looked at the main display. Earth hung below them, blue and green and scarred. The Usulam fleet was gone. The Cradle was gone. Elena Vasquez was everywhere and nowhere. He thought about the Dominion, about their empire of 70 systems, about their genetic perfection and their particle beams and their certainty that they were gods. He thought about human ships appearing in their skies without warning, human weapons folding inside their defenses, human soldiers boarding their bridges with welding torches and shotguns and nothing left to lose. He thought about Elena's last word. Fold, he said. And somewhere in the darkness between galaxies, a fragment of a human mind began to calculate the trajectory to the Asulan home world, not to destroy it. Not yet, just to remind them that they were not alone in the dark, that they had never been alone, that the thing in the dark with them had teeth.